I've watched people arrive here straight from a cold winter, and you can almost see the change happening. The shoulders drop, the pace slows. Within a few days, they're saying the same thing: I could live here. And honestly, I understand it, because Jomtien occupies a very interesting middle ground. Hua Hin in many ways is about the quiet life. Jomtien feels more like the easy life. Not as sleepy as some retirement towns, not as intense as central Pattaya, just connected and convenient. The sea across the road, food everywhere, transport that works, a modern condo within reach, and evenings that always seem to offer something happening without asking too much from you. At first glance, it can feel almost perfectly balanced. And maybe that's exactly why this conversation matters. Because I've noticed something over the years. The same thing that makes Jomtien feel so attractive in the beginning can sometimes create a different experience once the holiday feeling fades and ordinary life quietly takes over. So let's talk about why people fall for Jomtien in the first place. If you're choosing somewhere to base yourself in Thailand, particularly later in life, convenience matters more than most people expect. And Jomtien is unusually good at that. Let's start with the airport. One of the quiet advantages here is how simple arriving feels compared with other coastal towns. You land at Suvarnabhumi Airport, collect your bags, head downstairs, and there's a direct bus service that takes you straight towards Pattaya and Jomtien. No taxi bargaining, no complicated transfers. You land, and not long after that, you're here. For retirees who still travel, visit family, that matters more than people realise. And this is where Jomtien quietly separates itself from somewhere like Hua Hin. Hua Hin has many strengths, but Jomtien is simply better connected. There are good highways connecting Jomtien back towards Bangkok and across the eastern seaboard, making movement surprisingly easy. This makes you feel connected to the world rather than tucked away from it. For some people, that's incredibly reassuring. Then you have one of Jomtien's most underrated advantages: the baht bus system. And if you've never lived somewhere with affordable public transport, you can underestimate how important this becomes. 15 baht, that's often all it takes. You stand by the side of the road, wave one down, and life moves. No parking stress, no expensive taxis, no feeling stranded, no pressure to own a car or ride a motorcycle if you don't want to. That small blue song towel circling Beach Road and Second Road does something psychological as much as practical. It gives people confidence, particularly older expats, because mobility matters. The easier life feels, the more independent you remain. Now, geographically, Jomtien isn't really one place, and understanding the different areas helps explain why people experience it so differently. Pratumnak has a quieter, greener feel, more residential, less hectic, and popular with people who want convenience without living right in the middle of the action. Then you move towards Dongtan, and this area has a noticeably softer atmosphere, more walkable, more pedestrian friendly. The beach itself feels calmer: morning walkers, cafes, shaded stretches of promenade. A lot of long-term residents end up gravitating here because it balances access with breathing room. And then of course there's Jomtien Beach Road itself. This is the energetic heart. Convenience stores, restaurants, coffee shops, massage places, markets, bars, constant movement. You can simply walk out of your condo and let the evening happen around you. And this is why Jomtien works so well at first. Once the honeymoon feeling settles a little, something else comes into view. Not the holiday version of Jomtien, the practical version. Take immigration, for example. Nobody moves to Thailand dreaming about 90-day reports or the visa paperwork. But if you're staying long term, this becomes part of life whether you like it or not. And one of Jomtien's quieter strengths is that Jomtien immigration on Soi 5 sits right within the orbit of daily life. Depending where you live, a short walk or a baht bus ride away. Job done. Compared with some locations where immigration feels like an entire day disappearing from your week. The same applies with food. Now, Thailand is Thailand, and local food remains one of the great pleasures of living here. Markets, street stalls, little family places with menus that never quite change. But something else happens after 6 months or a year. Familiarity starts carrying emotional value. Not because you reject the Thai life, quite the opposite, but because comfort matters too, and Jomtien offers both. Hemingway's in Jomtien is the kind of place many long-term expats end up appreciating. Comfortable, familiar and relaxed. Somewhere you can spend an hour or two without feeling rushed or like you're still living out of a suitcase. Then you have places like Cheap Charlie's, occupying the other end of the spectrum entirely. Legendary amongst budget-conscious expats for one simple reason. Value. Not glamorous, not pretending to be anything special, just affordable, familiar, and constantly busy. And honestly, places like that do more emotional work than people realize. But here's another part of Jomtien life that deserves mentioning because it often gets overlooked in property videos and retirement guides. The evenings. And not necessarily the nightlife people immediately imagine when they hear Pattaya. Jomtien has its own rhythm after dark. You see it around the beachfront and the surrounding streets. The night markets, the food stalls, the casual wandering that happens once the heat fades. People browsing without much purpose, stopping for grilled seafood, picking up fruit, sitting with a coffee, watching the world move past. And this matters because night markets in Thailand are doing more than selling food. They're social spaces, their atmosphere. For many retirees and long-stay residents, that evening walk becomes part of the daily life. And then yes, there is nightlife too, and this is where Jomtien sits in an interesting middle ground. It's not central Pattaya, you're not surrounded by walking street intensity, but you're also not living in a town that shuts down early. Restaurants stay active, bars remain busy, live music appears in pockets, and perhaps that's part of the appeal. You don't have to plan entertainment, it exists around you. You can participate as much or as little as you like. For many people, particularly early on, this feels ideal. The town feels alive without feeling overwhelming. Then there is housing, and this is where the range in Jomtien becomes genuinely impressive. You can still find older, spacious condos around 10,000 baht a month. Bigger rooms, older fittings perhaps, but actual living space. Places that feel residential rather than temporary. Then you have the newer developments, pools, gyms, 20,000 baht and upwards depending on the location and obviously the facilities. And neither choice is automatically right, because the decision isn't purely financial, it's lifestyle. Some people want comfort and facilities, others want space and simplicity. And here's something else I've noticed. Jomtien gives you so much choice that sometimes the choice itself becomes part of the experience. Always another condo to view, another neighborhood, another option that looks slightly better, which is wonderful, but also creates a strange feeling that life never quite settles. And that's not a criticism, It's simply part of what makes Jomtien Jomtien. Now let's talk numbers, because people always ask about budgets. And the truth is, Jomtien can look deceptively affordable until you understand how the place actually works. Let's start with a 50,000 baht question, because this is often the benchmark people use when planning retirement in Thailand. At around 50,000 baht a month, you can live comfortably in Jomtien. Not extravagantly, but comfortably. A decent condo, mostly Thai food with occasional Western meals. Minimum transport costs if you're using baht buses and taxis sensibly. Utilities are covered. And enough left over to enjoy life without counting every coffee or meal. For many retirees, that's entirely workable. Now move towards 100,000 baht a month, and the picture changes quite noticeably. This is where Jomtien becomes very comfortable. You move into better buildings, moderner condos, pools, gyms, perhaps a sea view. You eat where you want rather than where your budget quietly pushes you to. Travel becomes easier, healthcare and unexpected costs feel less intimidating, and psychologically life becomes lighter. What Jomtien often does better than Hua Hin, and this is a genuine advantage, is offer stronger value in the modern condo market, particularly in that upper middle range. You can find newer developments with facilities and presentation that sometimes cost noticeably more in Hua Hin. So on paper, Jomtien can appear surprisingly attractive. But here's where the maths becomes more interesting, because housing is only part of the story. Jomtien has a spending pattern attached to it. Not because prices are outrageous, they're not, but because the opportunity to spend are constant. And this is something people don't always notice at first. You walk downstairs, intending to buy a coffee, and suddenly there's a market. A restaurant looks inviting, friends are meeting nearby, there's live music somewhere, a bar with a sea view, a night market gathering pace, perhaps dinner becomes drinks, drinks becomes a late evening, and none of that feels excessive in the moment. That's the point. Jomtien rarely pressures you to spend, it simply places options in front of you. And over time, that creates what I call lifestyle inflation. Not financial recklessness, just gradual expansion. The better life feels, the easier spending becomes. And honestly, this is why some people living on 50,000 baht in Jomtien feel perfectly content, while others quietly drift towards 70 or 80,000 without quite understanding how it happened. Then there are the hidden costs. Electricity. Those glass condos look amazing, and many are great to live in. But it depends which side your room is facing. That sun can change everything. Aircons run harder, longer, and the bills add up fast. 4,000, 5,000 baht. It catches people off guard. Because that sea view condo that looks so simple during the viewing can come with running costs nobody really mentioned. And then there are environmental trade-offs. Jomtien sits inside a high development corridor connected to the eastern seaboard. Most days you won't think about it at all, but occasionally air quality, traffic density, and urban development remind you that this isn't an isolated beach town. It's part of a much larger and rapidly growing region. Again, not criticism, just honesty. Because budgets aren't only about money, they're about the financial cost and the lifestyle cost. Now I want to talk about the side of Jomtien that usually takes a little longer to understand. Not the version you see during a week-long stay, not the sunset version, the lived-in version. Because every place has friction. And if you're making serious long-term decisions, you want to understand that honestly. Let's start with the traffic. Not Bangkok level chaos, but persistent everyday congestion, particularly around Beach Road and the wider Pattaya corridor. What looks close on a map doesn't always move quickly in reality. A short journey can become 15 or 20 minutes surprisingly easily once the afternoon and evening traffic builds. Then there's noise. Again, this isn't criticism, it's simply part of living inside an active, developing coastal city. Construction remains a constant feature across parts of Pattaya and Jomtien. New condos, roadworks, commercial developments, growth is still happening here, which means silence, proper quiet, isn't something Jomtien offers consistently. And this becomes more noticeable at night, because unlike Hua Hin, where evenings often soften and slow down, Jomtien tends to maintain momentum. The beachfront stays active, restaurants remain busy, bars continue humming, motorbikes pass, people move. The town rarely feels fully asleep. Then we should probably talk honestly about pollution and environmental reality, because retirement videos often avoid this conversation altogether. Jomtien sits inside a highly developed corridor linked to the eastern seaboard. Most of the time this barely registers, but some days, depending on the weather, wind conditions, air quality becomes more noticeable. The sea too deserves an honest mention. Jomtien and Pattaya waters have improved over the years, but this isn't the turquoise postcard water people associate with island Thailand or parts of the Andaman coast. And I think it's healthier to frame this as a trade-off rather than a disappointment. But the final layer of friction is more difficult to describe, because it isn't physical, it's social. And I think this matters more than many people realize. Jomtien is close to Bangkok, close to the airport, easy to enter, easy to leave. And because of that, the community develops a slightly different texture. People move through. Friends arrive, friends leave. Someone returns home for family reasons. Someone relocates to Chiang Mai. Someone decides Vietnam looks interesting. The movement isn't unpleasant. In many ways, it's part of the area's energy, but it creates a different social feeling from somewhere quieter and more settled. Sometimes Jomtien feels less like a neighborhood and more like a hub, a place where lives intersect rather than fully root. And depending on your personality, that's either liberating or quietly lonely. Hua Hin has turnover too, of course. Every expat town does. But certain pockets there feel slower, more anchored, more historically connected. This brings me to the part of the conversation I probably care most about. Because beyond prices, transport and location, this is where the real decisions live. Identity, routine, purpose. I've said it before on the channel that Thailand offers something genuinely valuable: freedom. And I don't mean fantasy freedom, I mean practical freedom. Less financial pressure, better weather, more breathing room. The ability to shape your days differently. And for many people leaving stressful working lives behind, that freedom feels almost revolutionary. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Freedom by itself doesn't create happiness. It creates possibility. And those are not always the same thing. Jomtien illustrates this beautifully, because the place makes life easy. Perhaps easier than many retirees have experienced in decades. Everything available with remarkably little effort. And early on, that's exhilarating. It should be. You've worked hard, you deserve enjoyment, you deserve rest. But something interesting starts happening after 6 months, sometimes a year. the excitement settles. Not because Jomtien changes, because you do. The novelty softens, the evenings that once felt endlessly exciting become familiar. The choices that felt liberating become ordinary, and quietly without warning, people begin asking a different question. What exactly am I building here? Because enjoying life and drifting through life are not quite the same thing. And Jomtien, with all its conveniences and social energy, creates a very specific trap. It is remarkably easy to remain permanently in holiday mode. There is always something available, and none of those things are bad. In moderation, many of them are part of a rich and enjoyable life. But if entertainment becomes structure, something eventually feels missing. And I've watched this happen. People stay busy, stay social, stay occupied, yet slowly feel less grounded rather than more. Because what most of us actually need isn't endless stimulation. It's rhythm. Not rigid schedules, not recreating working life, just enough structure to give your days shape. A morning walk that becomes yours, a gym where people recognize you, a local market where the vendors know your order, a coffee shop where the staff notice when you've been away, a language class, volunteering, photography, golf, writing, anything that turns geography into belonging. Because this is the irony of easy places. The more intentional you sometimes need to be. And I don't think this is unique to Jomtien, but Jomtien reveals the lesson very clearly. I've seen people arrive with purpose and thrive here beautifully. And I've seen others circle for years, socializing constantly, spending freely, always busy, yet somehow feeling less settled with each passing season. Not because Jomtien failed them, because freedom asked a question they hadn't fully answered. Who are you when nobody is telling you what to do anymore? And perhaps that's the real retirement question. Not where you live, but how you live once the structure disappears. Because Jomtien gives you space, but space alone is never the finished story. So where does all of that leave us? I'm not going to tell you Jomtien is better than Hua Hin. And I'm not going to tell you Hua Hin is better than Jomtien either. Because honestly, I don't think serious life decisions work that way. What I can tell you is where each place tends to win. Jomtien wins on convenience, quite comfortably if we're being practical about it. Airport access, transport, housing choice, food, night markets, nightlife, social opportunity, the sheer ease of getting things done. If you want retirement to feel connected, active and friction light, Jomtien is exceptionally hard to ignore. But Hua Hin wins somewhere else. It wins on calm, community, pace and character. The evenings feel different. The streets feel different. There are pockets of Hua Hin that still carry that slower rhythm many retirees quietly realize they were searching for all along. And neither of these is universally better. That's the important part. Because we're not comparing good and bad. We're comparing two very different answers to the same question. How do you want life to feel? Do you want ease, movement, options? A place where you can step outside and immediately feel activity and variety? Or do you want something quieter, more rooted? A place where life perhaps asks a little more of you, but sometimes giving something deeper back in return. And the older I get, the more I think this matters. Because places shape us, not dramatically, but slowly, almost invisibly. Jomtien doesn't really try to impress you. It doesn't demand patience. It doesn't place obstacles in your way. It simply waits. Transport is there, food is there, entertainment is there. Life sits at your fingertips and says, take what you want, and that generosity is real. But maybe the more interesting question is this: do we always live our best lives when everything becomes effortless? Because some friction is frustrating, but some friction quietly builds us. It creates routine, patience, community, a sense of earning our place. Jomtien removes much of that friction, and for many people, perhaps at exactly the right stage of life, that's a gift. But it's still worth asking honestly: do you want the easy life or the anchored life? And perhaps the truth is that neither answer is wrong. It's only personal to you. If you get into the stage where you're seriously thinking about making the move, it really helps to go beyond general advice and look at your own situation properly. That's why now I do one-on-one consultations. We go through things like your budget, lifestyle, expectations, visa options, and whether retiring in Thailand actually stacks up for you in the long term. It's practical, straightforward, and based entirely on your own circumstances. If you want to explore that, the link is below in the description. Just go to the extras section on the page and you'll see the consultation option there. And if you're simply enjoying the videos and finding them useful, even just supporting the channel there or leaving a comment really does help me make this kind of content in the future. Thanks for listening, guys. I'll see you on the next one.